Society has collapsed. My community has been disbanded. We've run out of ammo, and the word crime has lost all meaning. It's all a matter of survival now, and it's every man for himself. People are growing more desperate by the day. It's not a question of if you're going to have a violent confrontation, it's a question of when. Now, survival is mostly about avoiding confrontation, because all it takes is one cutout here, one little scratch, and it could potentially mean your death. The problem is that sometimes conflict is unavoidable, and sometimes the fight comes to you whether you want it or not. Even if you neutralize a threat, you don't want to be in a desperate mob's bad books, because if you do neutralize that threat, you're going to make enemies. And their people are going to come looking for them. And when they don't find them and they find you, there's going to be trouble. Today we're going to talk about how to avoid hostile situations by misleading or tricking your aggressors. So let's get to it. Information is the first line of defense. If you recall, I did a video last year entitled The 10 Layers of Home Defense. Using signage for home defense is but one of the many layers and should not be considered a comprehensive strategy, obviously. There's other layers of home defense like early warning systems, surveillance systems, alarm systems, lighting, guard dogs, a means of self-defense, door locks, barricades, fences. All of these things are going to be important if you're trying to build a comprehensive home defense strategy. The theory is that if somebody wants to enter your home or take your stuff, you have a brief window of opportunity to influence their offensive in some way, shape, or form, conveyed by the information that you provide to them. You have an opportunity to get inside their heads before they even make their first move. There are two general approaches to home security. One is trying to blend in as much as possible and be as gray man and as unattractive to intruders as possible, making it look like you have nothing that anybody wants, or you can fortify the place to the nines. Both of these have their pros and cons. For myself personally, I don't want to live like Oscar the Grouch in a trash can. Sure, nobody's going to bother you, but who really wants to live that way? And how effective is that strategy really going to be? You know, I've heard it said that if there is an SHTF event and people are going door to door looting, that you should make it look like your place has already been pre-looted. I think there may be a time and place for that, but I think the window for that sort of approach is going to be relatively small. If you're talking about a long game SHTF scenario where people are so desperate that they're willing to pick through things a second time, that's likely not going to stop an intruder. So in a case like that, using a sign to discourage people may actually still be very beneficial. Some things you should keep in mind when trying to craft the right sign are who exactly are you trying to target with your sign. Some people might even use signage in order to attract people to their property or conscript people into their group. But for the most part, you're going to be using it as a threat deterrent. So are you going to be targeting unorganized looters, people who are just opportunistic, passing by? Are you going to be targeting dedicated individual criminals? What about gangs and marauders, even rogue tyrannical government elements? How you craft the sign is likely going to boil down to what the type of disaster is you're preparing for and how far into the collapse it has ensued. In a flash SHTF situation like they experienced recently in South Africa, which was the result of a variety of socioeconomic factors, a simple showing of force and a very short and to the point direct communication, something along the lines of "you loot, we shoot," may be enough to dissuade a group. But remember, this may have legal ramifications, so do so at your own risk in accordance with the rules and laws of your country. But what about after the smoke clears? Will a sign like that is so generic actually be effective? several months or even years post-societal collapse, your signage may require more specificity in the message. People may become very desensitized to those run-of-the-mill taglines like "You loot, we shoot" by seeing these signs all over the place. So your sign should be very state and time dependent. Using profanity in a sign may be a strong showing of aggression, but it's also not very professional, and it might communicate that you're a sloppy, emotional person. These are things that people are going to read into, if only unconsciously. You may even try to use some kind of reverse psychology. This is what some people refer to as the terminus method. If you recall, there was cannibals in The Walking Dead who welcomed people into their community as a form of sabotage so that they could ambush them once they actually got there. Sometimes rolling out the welcome mat might bring people's defenses down just enough so that you can get the jump on them. But again, this is only if you are absolutely 100% certain that they have bad intentions, criminal intentions, and that they are up to no good. In the majority of cases, you should try your best to help as many people as possible, because people are going to be assets. And if you can bring somebody into your group, make provisions so that they can be an asset, not a burden on the group at some point down the road, then that is absolutely something you should consider. If you look at this sign right here, there's 3 different messages being communicated. Smile, you're on camera, I'm being watched. Trespassing is not allowed. And beware of dog. That's a lot of messages. On the one hand, it conveys that the person who owns this property is incredibly vigilant because they've went to the extent of using 3 signs. On the other hand, you only get a brief window where you're able to get into somebody's head. And this just goes back to the age-old principle of sometimes more is less. Another thing you're going to want to consider is the difference between signage used on your home and signage used on the perimeter. All of the signs you use should send a consistent message, especially if it's just subterfuge, especially if you're trying to misinform and mislead people. You want your message to be consistent. Now, I've read comments on the channel that go something like this: a sign's not going to discourage people who are dedicated and committed. And absolutely, this is but one of many layers of home defense. But are you seriously telling me that if you came across a place that had Pro 2A signs plastered all over it and a sign maybe saying "You loot, we shoot," that wouldn't discourage you just a little bit? I think that some people are perhaps overestimating their confidence in those types of situations. So I recently asked people to provide me, what would you write on a sign if you could only write one sign as a layer of home defense? So if you were showcased in this next segment, I'm gonna reach out to you personally through your YouTube, so make sure you're checking the notifications on those comments. This one is from MGK Outdoors, and I find it interesting. Caution, temporary offender holding area. So to me, this is going to tell me one of 2 things. It's going to tell me that there's a group which is organized enough in order to house dangerous people and incarcerate them to some degree, and also that there's going to be those dangerous people element behind the scenes here. This is probably a place I'm not going to go because it signals that there's a sophisticated operation that's occurring. It's likely that this is going to be a place that you pass up for an easier opportunity. This one is from C. Franco 101. Highly contagious quarantined individuals inside. Now, obviously, this is going to be effective in a serious pandemic scenario, one that actually had a very high fatality rate. It's probably not going to be that useful if we're just talking about current situation that's going on. I don't think this is going to discourage a lot of people, to be honest. But the idea is that if you come onto the property and try to commit a crime, that you are liable to contract some sort of life-threatening illness, which may be enough in and of itself to discourage would-be aggressors. This next one is from Jason Lockwood, and he says, deadly biohazard, extremely infectious area. Now, this could be a variety of things. The reason why this is different from don't open dead inside or infected people inside is because you could be talking about something that's environmental. For example, you could be talking about a radiological spill or something radioactive, some contaminant, some sort of toxicity that you might ingest or intake if you do encroach upon this property. All right, so this next one is from Phantom Sharpshooter and aptly named limited ammo, there will be no warning shot. So this signals that there's a scarcity of resources and that this individual is left with few options. Okay, I like it because it's basically conveys seriousness. It's conveying that there's not much room for negotiation, but it's also showing that the person is desperate, and desperate people are certainly not people you want to mess with. Now, in the same vein, this one is by Adam Histrop, and it's very similar. He says, "Well, you're reading this, I'm deciding on head or chest." So what this communicates to me is that I'm within visual range of this person. They're utilizing two very important things in this sign. They're utilizing specificity when they're talking about head or chest, and they're also personalizing the message by saying you. So this is something which is going to hit home for a lot of people because it's going to make you think that you're within visual range, that you're being watched. People are going to start looking around, where is he? And that's going to evoke a lot of anxiety, which is going to trip up any intruder's aggression. This one by Josh Carucci has come up probably around 10 times in the comment section as well, and it's the age-old "you loot, we shoot." This is probably one of the most popular ones whenever there's a riot that breaks out in a city and people are trying to protect their businesses. This is just a very common one, and you know what? It's effective for those short-term rioting flare-ups that happen, but I don't think it's going to be something that's effective in the long term. So you're going to want to be mindful of those things when you're making signs like this. This next one is by Zach H. This one, once again, is kind of reaching. It really depends on the post-disaster world that you're living in. Unexploded minefield. I don't know if I'd be walking in there if I seen a sign like this. Maybe if we were talking about a post-global World War III scenario, then this might be kind of believable. Instead of using unexploded mines, you could say something about booby traps. Now, on the positive side of that, people may be less likely to encroach on your property just out of fear that, well, you know, why even bother? Let's move to an easier target. On the other hand, it might just make people more vigilant, and if you're up against a very dedicated group, that may not be something that slows them down that much. But even if you could just get in their heads a little bit so they're moving a bit slower as they approach you, then that's going to afford you more time. It's going to put them on edge. That's going to create an elevated amount of stress that's going to work to your advantage when defending your property. This next one is a classic. This one is from Golf and Guns, but I'm pretty sure that about 10 people left this comment at least. Trespassers will be shot on sight. And as you noticed, the person who I got to write this made a little bit of a typo, but it kind of makes sense both ways. It's supposed to be written sight as in sight. And the reason why this is important, this basically means that there is no negotiation. I would say that I would never employ a sign like this unless I was 100% sure that it was a full-blown Mad Max situation, because again, there may be legal recourse for something like this. But the reason why this is so psychologically powerful is that it's non-negotiable. It's basically saying that as soon as we see you, it's lights out. Another type of sign that I think is effective is something simple like this. It puts me on notice that I am on camera, that somebody is watching me, and that I need to be extremely careful in terms of how I proceed from this point forward. All right, so this one is from 19PP77 and it reads, "Hungry, thirsty, and sick. Please help." Now, the thing I like about this one is that it's basically asking people for help, which communicates that, hey, we don't have anything. We actually need your help. We're going to be a burden on you and possibly infect you with something that is going to get you sick. And as we all know, getting sick after a disaster in a collapsed environment could very well be a death sentence. All right, this next one is by Ivor the Insane. And this one is very interesting. Now, this actually isn't a sign. The person I got to write these signs out for me made a little bit of a mistake. What they were supposed to do is draw what was described here, okay? Bloody smiley face, bloody handprints. What you're trying to convey here is that the person beyond the line is insane, okay? So we're not talking about signs with this one. The word sign itself doesn't necessarily imply the use of language. You could use a lot of different things. This is where the whole Vlad the Impaler strategy of putting heads on pikes and that sort of thing to discourage would-be aggressors, it's sending a message, basically. And you can send a message without having to utilize language. Okay, so this one is from Teach the Young Women, and they say, "We need food, willing to trade crafting supplies for any food items." So I'm guessing what they're trying to do here is say that we're going to give you something that's completely useless for something that's very useful, which is basically communicating to the person that these people have nothing. The only problem with a sign like this is when you say something like crafting supplies, you imply that there's women and children potentially. So you have to be very careful when crafting a sign like this that you're not giving away too much information, if you're not giving away misinformation that may actually backfire against you and can communicate weakness or vulnerability, which predators are going to prey on. All right, so this one is by Prepper POV, and I would say this is the one I like the most. This is the one that I really believe probably had the most thought put into it. "We stand as a community against looters and have each other's backs." What this conveys to me is that if I do intrude on this person's property, it's not only going to be them that I have to reckon with. It's going to be an entire community of people. Okay, neighborhood watch is effective for that very reason, that it's not only one person you're dealing with, but a lot of people. So I do think that this is one of the best signs that you could potentially employ, especially in a long-form, long-term SHTF situation where people are already going to be pretty hardened. The more generic signs might not work as effectively, but there's safety in numbers, and that's what this sign conveys. This one is by Northside Art. Once again, I think this is one where somebody was really thinking when they wrote this. "House looted, they took everything. Kids, meet at Aunt Mary's, love you." Now this is good, but it's also bad, okay? It's good because it's conveying that we have nothing, so I like that aspect of it. The only problem is that if things get really desperate, nothing's to stop somebody from wanting to take a second run through that property because they might think that something has been missed. So I like the imagination that the person put into this sign. However, I do think that there's some drawbacks to it that we should consider. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this one and if there's any way to improve it to further discourage people from coming onto the property. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any more ideas for using signage as a threat deterrent post SHTF. And please, if you enjoyed this video, go click subscribe because there's a lot more great content coming, and I guarantee you, you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe. Get ready because things are about to get serious. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. The best quality products at the best prices. Use discount code SURVIVALPREPPER, all caps, all one word, for 10% off. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.